Some of you might be wondering, why am I standing up here as a former NFL player instead of a current one? You wouldn't be alone. A lot of people were shocked when I announced that I was retiring from the NFL. I had hoped that I could retire very quietly, without a lot of fanfare, but this turned out to not be quite the case. My phone started ringing, and it did not stop. Why did I retire? Reporters wanted to ask. After all, it seemed like I had everything going for me. I was making a very good paycheck. It's true. Over 20 times my MIT stipend. And if I played decently well that season, I had a good chance of signing a new contract for millions of dollars more. I was doing something perceived by the public as glamorous. I was playing football after all. Not to mention, I was playing a game I loved. Why would I give that up? So people started to speculate about my reasons. Some of the speculation had truth to it, some of it didn't. But the main reason I decided to stop playing football was very simple. I had a few math problems I wanted to solve. I called the coach of the Ravens, Jim Harbaugh, to tell him my decision. He was surprised. I had been working as hard as I ever had all spring, staying late, taking extra reps. I had given him no reason to think that I was thinking about retiring. Harbaugh didn't know that when I arrived at MIT as a graduate student 2 years ago, it was like coming to paradise. There were brilliant people everywhere. There were chalkboards on the hallway walls. Chalkboards. Coach also didn't know that I had been taking classes during the football season, doing my work on off days. Still, he understood. Because Harbaugh might not have understood the appeal of mathematics, he knew I had a passion for it, and he understood passion. You don't get very far in the NFL without it. He understood about dedication, commitment, and even obsession. And so when I said it was time for me to focus on my other passion, he respected my decision. I was passionate about football too, of course, and had been ever since I was a kid. But the more time I spent doing math, the deeper I got into it, the more consuming that passion became. I think everyone in this room should be able to understand why. Mathematics is so big, so open. You can go anywhere with it. It informs everything in this world. And you all know I'm not exaggerating. There is nothing that we see or hear or do that cannot be described by mathematics in some way. Even thinking, because logic too is a branch of mathematics. Mathematics is at once wondrously simple and incredibly complex, important for what it can help us understand about the world, but it's also significant and beautiful in its own right. Take one of the problems that had been on my mind the weeks leading up to my decision to retire. It's known as the Traveling Salesman problem. Mathematicians call it TSP for short. Basically, the idea is this. Let's say you have a certain number of cities, and all the cities are connected by highways. What's the shortest route that visits every city once and finishes at the starting point? This is a picture of the traveling salesman problem on the states of the United States, in case you're curious. You can do this problem by brute force, checking every possible route to find the shortest one. But you'll discover something alarming. If you have more than a few cities, this quickly becomes impossible. Let's say you only have 15 cities, not too many. There are more than 87 billion possible routes. Billion. What about 100 cities? That's 100 factorial. We haven't yet even built computers powerful enough to calculate all the possibilities in a single lifetime. So I'm trying to find another way. This problem is part of a class of problems known as NP-hard, which means there's no algorithm that would let a computer complete the problem in a reasonable amount of time. So we have to come up with a different approach. We have to reimagine the graph and come up with an algorithm that would get us as close as possible. If you pose this question to your students, they might come back with the question, what's the big deal? It would be nice for FedEx to know how to map the route most efficiently, but why would anyone else care? It turns out that TSP has hugely important applications on how to go about, say, drilling holes in manufacturing semiconductors or sequencing DNA. And solving it could help us make advances in machine learning. Instead of cities and highways, we could talk about nodes and edges. We could replace the phrase round trip with Hamiltonian cycle. There are almost certainly applications in areas we haven't dreamed of yet. The traveling salesman problem was first formulated in the early 1800s, long before computers and DNA sequencing was around. For more than 200 years, people have been trying to solve it. But even if there weren't all these important real-world applications, I don't think I'd be able to get this question out of my mind. Don't get me wrong. I truly hope solving it leads to big breakthroughs in things like decoding the genome. But there's something inherently interesting and elegant about the problem and the different techniques we're using to approach it. The traveling salesman problem reminds me a little of the puzzles I used to do when I was a kid. When I was growing up, I was obsessed with doing workbooks and puzzle books. I had no idea that the things I was doing after school was related to what I was doing in math class. To me, the puzzles were games, not so different from some of the video games I played. They were little competitions that I had with myself, and I was extremely competitive. Maybe I even still am, a little bit. But I loved doing them. I couldn't even finish them fast enough. As soon as I was done with one, I wanted to do another. I raced through these books aimed at my age level, and so my mother started getting me workbooks for older kids, and I raced through those too. I never read the lessons or instructions that were at the start of the section. I didn't like being helped. I was always trying to figure things out for myself. The puzzles I liked best were the ones that had no obvious method for doing them. This wasn't because I was some kind of genius. It was because I was stubborn, and I didn't like being told what to do. I had no idea that those endless hours I spent were preparing me to be a mathematician. I was learning how to separate variables, recognize patterns, identify relevant information, and create my own tools and techniques for solving problems. I was beginning to understand when to trust my instincts and when to double back. At the time, though, I thought I was just playing. I was having fun. I didn't love math when I was younger in school. I thought sometimes it was boring, and I found it hard to pay attention. I didn't like memorizing formulas or taking tests. I especially disliked doing problems the way teachers told me to, instead of figuring out techniques and methods for myself. My teachers didn't love me either. I'm sure you can relate. I used to drive them crazy because I wouldn't participate in class and I wouldn't show my work. To me, the math we were doing in school seemed totally disjoint and disconnected from anything that mattered. My mom, though, knew better. She knew I was doing math, and she saw that I loved it. But naturally being concerned about my future, she started to think what I should do with my interest in mathematics. She decided that I should be an engineer. But since I was her son, and therefore the greatest genius the world had ever seen, not just any engineer, she decided that I should have the coolest, grandest job she could think of. I should become an aerospace engineer, a rocket scientist. But I wanted to be a football player. Why? I don't have to explain this to you. For the same reason, boys all over the country want to be a football player when they grow up. It's obvious. Everything around them tells them that a football player is a great thing to be. They see it when they turn on the television. They see it in the way football players are treated in the movies and even at their own schools. They hear about it in small talk about Sunday's big game that they overhear in line at the supermarket. They see it when they watch it themselves, in the athleticism of the players, the thrilling, explosive action, and the intense competition. Let's be honest, football is cool. And from the same places, they learned that math is not. Being a football player is hard, but I'll bet being a math teacher who wants to inspire kids in STEM is a lot harder. You are up against so much in our culture. It's a point of pride for some people to be bad at math. Math is associated with homework, not with daily lives. It's drudgery, not something that anyone could be passionate about. This is a huge problem. The stakes are high. So far as a nation, I have to admit, we haven't been doing well. The default, not only for students, but adults, is to think that math doesn't matter, that it's not for them. And that has consequences. A measure of mathematical performance of young people in the US, the National Assessment of Educational Progress, has found a stagnation in mathematical improvement over the years. I don't have answers about how to fix this. I'm not going to pretend to. And I know it's so easy for me to stand up here and say all you have to do to inspire kids to be passionate about mathematics is to give them puzzles or to claim that it's inherently interesting. What do you do when a student says doing homework calculating dozens of integrals is not interesting? What do you do when they say, what's so inspiring about the multiplication tables? And why are we learning them anyway, when all we have to do is pull out our phones to find the answer? Why is it worth the struggle? After all, let's be honest, you can get through life without knowing 8 times 9. I don't think the answer is to lie to them. No, it's true. Most students won't need to know how to calculate the volume of a sphere or compute derivatives, although some of them might find really interesting careers that involve them, like finance or engineering or computer science or mathematics. They probably aren't going to be using tangents and cosines or the quadratic formula, but they will need to think. Math is also reasoning. It's problem solving. It helps us understand what is true and what is false, what's conditional and what is guaranteed. It helps us read the news. If you don't understand statistics, then you're likely to misunderstand reporting about crime or healthcare or poverty. If you don't understand how probability works, you're going to be more inclined to believe coincidences are part of conspiracies, or you might not know how to interpret the results of an election poll. If you don't understand game theory, then you might be more likely to start a nuclear war. Properly managing money means understanding concepts like compound interest, percentages, rates of return, risk analysis, time horizons, and statistical concepts. And if you think you can just get someone to hire to do that for you, then you might really be in trouble. If math really is not for you, then I have news for you. Money probably isn't either. Better problem solving is something that everyone needs, whether an architect, an engineer, a football player, or a parent. Kids don't need to want to be the next Einstein to get a lot out of math. Not everyone should do calculus, just as not everyone should play football. But everyone should be able to reason well, recognize patterns, to use logic, to think quantitatively, make rational predictions, and communicate their thinking clearly. I think the best education not only prepares students to use mathematics in their daily life, but encourages them to follow their interests, to think more deeply, range wider, and pursue their curiosity. It encourages them to be resilient, to recognize that yes, math can be hard, but there's satisfaction in pushing through that struggle. Most of all, STEM helps students think for themselves. It encourages them to ask why something is true, and then prove it. It wasn't until I got to Penn State that I found professors and mentors who pushed me down those paths. They constantly challenged me and engaged me, meeting with me outside of class, giving me books to read and problems to think about. They taught me not only new theorems, but also to believe that no question was either too stupid or too hard to ask. They encouraged my curiosity, and they showed me that mathematics is a kind of thrilling quest. I hope every kid is lucky enough to have a teacher who does the same. Thank you.
And John, while we wait for some of the questions to come in and some of the people to line up, I just wanted to say thank you for being here and for being an inspiration to all of us in the audience. I'm blown away by the passion you have for mathematics and problem solving.
No, thank you. It's amazing to be here with all of you, with so many like-minded people. And I know you love mathematics just as much as I do, and love trying to inspire the next generation of this world, and to show them that math matters, and more, you're going to need math to live in this world.
Oh yeah. I'm sure everyone in the audience here will agree with you, and I think your message this morning was just right on target, and it's exactly what we're trying to do at TQ. Help educators reignite their passion for teaching, so thank you.
No, thank you. I mean, one thing I have to say about TI is I'm thankful for what they've allowed me to do and how they've allowed me to reach kids all across the country through our programs. So I want to say thank you for that.
It's our pleasure. Now look, I see we already have some people lined up, and I'm sure we're going to run out of time. So if you've got a question, you better start lining up now. Let's start over here with Sarah.
All right. Hi, John.
Hi, how are you?
Good to meet you.
Likewise.
This question came in on Twitter from Jill Pizarek from St. Louis. She asks, what is the best way to motivate students of color using technology?
That's a great question. And I have to say, as a mathematician of color, I would say that sometimes it's hard, especially for people from disadvantaged socioeconomic backgrounds, to have access to technology, to have access to books, to have access to teachers. But one of the most amazing things of the 21st century, I would say, is how much information is readily available just through your phone or through the internet. 40 years ago, it was hard to try to learn about some area of math. You had to try to see if there were books in your local library, and if there weren't libraries where you lived, well, you were just out of luck. And I think that's one of the great things about our world, is knowledge and information is becoming readily available. And I would say so many outlets like MIT OpenCourseWare and others make it extremely more accessible for people from disadvantaged backgrounds to have open access to knowledge. I truly believe that people who are born into better situations, wealthier backgrounds, all the geniuses in this world don't all get born to wealthy parents. There are so many Einsteins and John von Neumanns that are being missed and lost because of the household they're born into. And my hope is that, as time goes on, this never happens. So that was.
And these are the teachers that are going to do it.
That was a little long-winded, but yes.
All right, I think we have another question. We'll go to the right side this time, or your left.
So you're actually being aired because my students are watching this, and a lot of them are telling me, I don't have time for constructive struggle. I don't have time to be doing homework. And what I tell them often is, just like when you're on a football, because I have a whole bunch of football players, just like when you're on the football field, the coach isn't just going to tell you, here's a move, now go play. Can you tell my students, can you kind of describe to them your experience, not just on the football field, but also in the classroom as well?
Okay, so I think I understand the question. And what I would say is that, anything that you're trying to get good at, whether it's, a certain football technique or whether it's a certain way of thinking mathematically, this takes practice, this takes work. You need to do your homework, whether or not, someone gives it to you or not. And I think that if you have a passion to be great at what you do, whether it's in sports or in academics, this should permeate throughout your life. If you love sort of doing football training and, doing your athletic homework, but somehow you're getting C's and D's in math class and not doing your assignments, you aren't truly dedicated to being the best you can be and trying to, succeed. Because no matter how much you love football or you love whatever sport you play, eventually that's going to end and you're going to need something afterwards.
Well said, well said. All right, you sir, you've been patiently waiting. You're up.
I have two questions, if that's okay.
A double header, I'm ready.
What percentage of NFL football players would you say don't know how to manage their money well? And also, do you think your interest in learning and mathematics helped you become a better football player?
Okay, so to answer the first question, I would say, it depends on how you define well. I would actually say I would put it right around 85 to 90%. And hear me out on this. The NFL is largely full of young 20-something-year-old males. And it's not an NFL problem. I want you to think about all the young 20-something-year-old males you know in the US. And I would argue 90% of them do not know how to manage money well. Thankfully, the NFL has tons of resources that focuses on education, that focuses on giving NFL players access to people who do know how to manage money well so that they don't have to worry about these things. But I would say that, it's easy to look at, these stories of NFL players blowing all their money and sort of, think it's crazy. But if you think about all the young 20-somethings when they blow all their money, they've blown $4 grand. When, a first round pick blows all his money, it's much tougher. So I'd say 90%, at least when they come in, but through NFL education programs, that number definitely goes down. And for the number who still does not know how to manage their money, thankfully there's people who, take care of these things for them. And the second question was, yes. I think sort of being able to think quantitatively and being able to make good rational decisions quickly helps you as a football player. But I'd be lying if I didn't say that I actually think mathematics really did sort of limit me as a football player somewhat. But I'm not sad about it because I love mathematics so much. This mathematics ended my career. So I can't not say that. So no, when you find something so amazing, and my love of mathematics has just grown every single year. I'm 26 now. I'm 26, right?
Yeah,
I'm
that's what I read.
26 now.
That's what it says. Sweet child of mine.
And every single year, I love math more than the last. And every single year, I'm more excited to try to solve some of the world's toughest problems, and so excited to try to share my passion of math with others, especially with young people. So, yeah.
Yeah, I can't believe you said math. It was a little bit of it held you back a little bit. But what was a loss, I said earlier, for the Ravens was a huge win for all of us in the math education world. We got folks on Facebook Live calling in. I mean, everywhere in the world. We're excited about what you're about to do. We have a question over here on the left side of the room.
Hey, John, we are, definitely. My son actually went to Penn State, same time you were there. So yes, I know you're 26 because I watched you play football. But my question is, we have a lot of kids, that throughout the high school years who are gifted athletically and sometimes not so mathematically. And so they think that they're going to be the next superstar. So how did you manage in high school and then through a D1 athletics program to continue with a program of such caliber of mathematics? Because it was not easy at Penn State, I'm sure, to balance that out. And then on the second question is just, how did you balance the geekiness of it all and be a football player and the mathematics, which I'm loving your passion for math and football, so thanks.
Okay, so the first thing I want to do to talk about this sort of like football versus math sort of thing, I go and I talk to a lot of high schools and I talk to a lot of middle schools, and there's lots of people who, want to be professional football players or professional basketball players. And I respect that. And that's, this is something to aspire to. But I always do the following thought experiment. And it's interesting. So we can do it here as well. So I'm going to give you two options for your career path. The first option is, let's say you're a football player and you're really good at football. You make it to the NFL, you leave early, you don't get a college degree, and you have an average NFL career, you make it 3 years. Your salary probably over those 3 years total is, let's say, $2 million, not counting taxes. And once you're done, the issue is you don't have a college degree and you don't have very good job prospects. So that's option number one, and you have trouble finding a job. Option number two, you don't get to play pro football, but instead, you get your degree, and let's say you become a doctor or a lawyer, or let's say an engineer, and you make $120,000 for, say, the next 30 years. Which one would you rather be? Which career would you rather have? Who wants option one? No? Who wants option two? And I do this in schools whenever I get this type of question. And believe it or not, everyone raises their hand for option two. Because as soon as you think about the idea of, even if you make it as a pro football player, if you only make it for 2 or 3 years, which is the average, sure, $2 million sounds like a lot. Uncle Sam takes about half. And this has to last you for the rest of your life. And there's only about 1,500 professional football players in this world. Think about how many engineers there are, how many doctors, how many lawyers. Those are the careers that will give you sustainability and will, carry you through the rest of your life. So I always sort of do this to stress the importance of education. And now I'm going to move back to the two questions you asked me, which I've forgotten to some extent, but I think I remember. And I'm going to say that actually all my sort of football friends, they always thought it was really cool that I did math. They always thought it was amazing. They always wanted to know about it. They were always so interested in the things I did. And they would always just tell me, math wasn't for me. I wasn't ever good at math, but they loved that, that I could do it. And I would always try to tell them, no, it's not, that math isn't for you. Sometimes you just get off on the wrong foot. So.
Thank you. And I love that you also threw in, you're living the third option.
Yes.
Right, of doing both.
Yeah, I am living the third option. That is true.
Hey, look, I think we have someone on Facebook Live with a question.
Yes, this is coming from Nancy Summer.
Hi,
and
Nancy.
She wants to ask, what is the one thing you have never done that you would really like to do?
Whew. Only one. I only get to pick one. The one thing I would like to do that I have never done yet. One thing that I aspire to as a mathematician is, by the time, I'm done and, I'm gone, I want to at least solve one very big problem that helps this world. And that's one thing I really want to do.
Given how you've tackled life so far, we're confident that you'll hit that target. Question on the left side of the room here.
Hello, John.
Oh, you're good.
Cesar Rodriguez, Rudder High School, Bryan, Texas, locally. I have a question for you on the motivation of students.
Yes.
I have a group of students that is very low socioeconomic standing, and they seem to always give up before they actually ever get started. Mm-hmm. So my question to you is, what drove you to become a success in high school, even though your love for mathematics was not obvious to you at the time?
That's a great question, and I'm not the best person to answer this. Quite frankly, my mother would be, I have to admit. No, I'm serious. Because my mother certainly struggled more in terms of coming from a very, very sort of poor socioeconomic background and educating herself and getting a college degree and becoming a nurse and later a lawyer, that I would say the reason why I always sort of persevered and always sort of tried to be whatever I wanted to be is because my mother, she always instilled in me that whatever I wanted to be, whatever I aspired to, I should try to do it. I should not give up, and that anything I want to be, I can at least try. And that the thing that will hold me back from whether or not I achieve something, she made sure that it was never the household I was born into. It was never lack of opportunity. It was always going to be lack of talent, lack of ability, lack of work ethic, lack of luck, but never anything to do with the household I was born into. And that's because of the struggles she faced. And I would say that this is actually a problem in our country. This is a real problem. The issue of kids feeling left behind, kids feeling like they don't have a chance before they even try. And this is something my mother has talked to me about, that she's experienced, and it's hard, and this is not an easy thing to fix, but I would, I would say the best advice I can give is try to see past your circumstances, try to see past what everyone around you is doing, and elevate yourself, and see if you can, if you can do better. And it's hard, and I don't have an easy answer for that.
Thank you.
Oh, your mom sounds awesome.
Yeah, why am I here?
I think we'll try
Next
to invite
event,
her.
you just need to bring her. You can
That's
leave
what I'm
me at
hearing.
home.
Let's take note of that. We have a question over here on the right side.
What advice would you give to students who struggle with problem solving and accessing multiple tools that they have in their tool belt?
Interesting. That's a good question. So I love the tools in the tool belt. I would say one of the most important abilities in math is to be able to look at a problem, break it down in terms of what it fundamentally is asking, what the fundamental elements are, and then look at each element and say, what in my tool belt is useful for this? And I think there's two ways to go about this. One, working on your ability to take some problem you haven't seen and break it down into its core elements. And two, not just have things in your tool belt that you've sort of memorized, but understanding every single tool you have, how it works and what it's useful for. So there's both ends of that problem.
Thank you, John. I think what you just described around problem solving is just, it's an absolute survival skill for all kids today, regardless of what they choose. We're on to the left side of the room.
I just want to say, can you please consider running for Secretary of Education?
He said consider.
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 I'm serious, but I also, there's certain things in mathematics that I don't know what the right word is, fall in love with. And I was wondering if you could just share maybe a high-level thing you love and something that maybe I can understand and think about later.
A high-level thing I love about math.
And low.
And low, high and low. Okay. You know what? I'm gonna hit math and computer science. Something interesting to me. Everyone knows the quadratic formula, right? This is something you learn early on. Negative b plus or minus the square root of, continue, yeah. So an interesting thing is, coding has become more and more important in our world. And something really sort of interesting and elegant is that anytime you sort of want to code something or you want to build something to work, you have to be careful. So for instance, when computers solve a second order polynomial equation, they don't actually use the quadratic formula as it is. And so if you ask someone, code how to solve a second order polynomial equation, they would just code, the quadratic equation. You get A, you get B, you get C, and now you send out this answer. But in fact, because computers aren't like humans, computers, like calculators, the way they store numbers are as approximations using a finite number of bits. Actually, the procedure of negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac can actually turn out to be disastrous when b is much, much bigger than, when b squared is much, much bigger than 4ac. Because if you think about it, negative b plus something that's almost b is adding two numbers that are very large and almost the same. And this leads to loss of precision. So even computations that are easy for you to do on paper, if you don't tell the computer how to do it properly, it can give you completely wrong and wild answers. And one of the things that's really interesting to me is sort of taking things we know and trying to communicate things clearly through computers, because one of the most amazing things I think about coding and computers in the 21st century is the following fact. Computers aren't smart, computers aren't stupid. They're only as smart or as stupid as the person using. And that's just one example of how something, a formula so simple, ingrained in our world, when you actually see how this gets transformed into something that's used in the daily world through technology and computers, how it gets more complicated. And for people who are curious about the answer, if you have an instance of the quadratic formula where b squared is much bigger than 4ac, what you should do is just multiply top and bottom by the conjugate, the rational conjugate. I mean the root conjugate, excuse me. And then all of a sudden you get something stable. So, something interesting.
Thank you. All right, I think, wow, Facebook Live is busy. We have another question from Facebook Live.
Yes, John, this is coming in from Heidi and Kim. What advice do you have for students attending university, maybe future MIT math students, and how do you have time to travel to inspire all these students?
Okay, first my advice to future sort of undergrad math students, I would tell them to explore. Too often, students take this class, which is a prerequisite for that class, and these are the classes I need to take to get my degree. I would tell you to explore different areas of math, different areas of science, to truly understand how interconnected everything is, and also to get sort of wide experiences to truly figure out what's that one thing that you're really passionate about. And your second question was, how do I find time to make trips like this? Well, I do math on the plane. I do some math in the hotel room. Some of you who said hi to me at dinner, I was doing math.
You were
at dinner.
doing math backstage.
I was doing math backstage before I came out here. That's true as well. So that's how I find time, and that's one of the amazing things about being a mathematician that I love, is that you can do mathematical research at dinner, in your hotel room, on your couch. I like to tell my fiance that a lot when she says I'm just sitting on the couch doing nothing. I say, no, I'm thinking, so. Yes.
All right, we have two more people standing. They'll be the last two questions. You, sir?
Good morning, Mr. Urschel. My name is Cornell Lacey, here representing the Barack Obama Male Leadership Academy in Dallas, Texas. And I just wanted to say that I was grateful to hear about how your brain processes, but more importantly and interestingly, how you had this disdain for doing problems the way the teacher told you how to do them. I always tell my students, I try to give you several strategies, and it's not just always about my way. Mm-hmm. But it seems, I can only imagine that mind being in a high school classroom, a traditional high school classroom setting, to where you're 3 to 4 lessons ahead where you're going, where the teacher may be at that point and where the rest of the class may be. And I feel like a lot of us here have students that are like that, maybe 1 or 2 out of the entire group. And I just want to know, because sometimes these students get written off as either being disengaged or they're not taking their homework seriously, when in actuality, they can ace your test. They just don't think the homework is worth their time. So what advice do you think, or what strategies could your instructors have used to fully engage the mind that you had in their classroom, or what could we do with those students in our classroom?
That's a great question.
Yeah. I'm gonna say, I'm actually going to give you a concrete answer. I think one of the best things you can do for extremely gifted youth who feel like they aren't being challenged is to say, okay, I'll challenge you. And here's my recommendation. Who here knows about the International Math Olympiad, IMO? Good, a good amount. So I would recommend giving them additional problems, additional exercises that are just simply Math Olympiad problems. There's a plethora of old exams, practice tests. Give them these problems and tell them, go and work on them and try to solve them as fast as you can, and tell them these are the problems that people pick to challenge the world's most talented youth your age. And let's see how you stack up. Let's challenge you. Let's really put you to the test. And they'll struggle some at first, but I truly believe that children want to be challenged and they like competition, and giving them the opportunity to prove I'm just as smart, if not smarter, than the so-called world's smartest high school kids. It's an amazing thing, and it's an amazing ability to have. And suppose they get into that, and suppose they start doing these problems and really take to it. Who's to say that child in your class who is disengaged and feels like they aren't being challenged can't become the winner of the International Math Olympiad? Who's to say that?
Very nice, concrete suggestion. We have time for one more quick question.
Yes. Hey, John. My name's Alexander. I'm a 23-year-old graduate from UTSA here with my bachelor's in mathematics. I'm currently teaching, but I'm really looking forward to grad school. I was wondering, to expand upon that Facebook Live question, do you have any advice for people pursuing their masters and doctorates in applied mathematics?
My biggest piece of advice for getting your doctorate in applied math is one of the traps I see from, I know so many people who go into math to get a PhD. So many people love math. Do not try to get a PhD in math unless you not only love math, but you love mathematical research, because these are two different things. And so often I see, kids who are brilliant in math, love math, top of their class in undergrad at, say Caltech or wherever, and they go to get a math PhD just because, well, that's what they should do. And it turns out they love math, they love teaching people math, they love using math, to solve problems, but they don't actually love the process of mathematical research. And that I would tell you to make sure you actually love that part of it before you decide to get a PhD. And also, when you're deciding where to go to get your PhD, it's important to pick the school based off that school having advisors that you think would fit well with you. The key to a happy PhD is having a good advisor. I promise you.
Thanks for the advice, John. And look, we are all out of time, but please join me in giving John Urschel another big round of applause.